Hey, Bill.
Hello, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ. We are just literally days from Mitt Romney's becoming the president-elect.
You are very confident, sir.
I'm not confident. I think it is a jump ball. But some people are pretty confident. Some people think that it's like a 72% chance that Obama will be re-elected, and other people disagree with that. And that's
You're referring, I think, to the statistician, blogger of the New York Times, Nate Silver.
right. He's become a celebrity in the past. Definitely in the past several years, but especially lately. In the past months, he has been celebrated by media elites and been all over on TV shows, and not just the typical talking head TV shows, but he's transcended that. But he's also become very disdained by a lot of conservatives. But either way, he's been the talk of the town, and I've written a couple posts about it. The first post I wrote about it a few weeks ago, I think I might have been. I obviously I didn't discover him, but I think that I might have been at the forefront of this renaissance and in criticizing Silver. Really kind of blew up, and I got a lot of criticism, a lot of people attacking me, and a few people congratulating me on that. But since then, it's been all over the place. National Review's gone after him. Ezra Klein from the Washington Post has defended him. It's been quite interesting to watch.
Well, I don't think Silver is necessarily above criticism here. There are certain things that I've seen in his model that I question. For example, I don't believe he's laid out every aspect of his model. Well, actually, let me just back up for a second before I get into my own spiel. I think the big sort of meta debate here is the approach. So Nate Silver is a professional statistician. His background's in sports statistics. He made a name for himself in 2008 as a Daily Kos diarist, and he became able to game out the Clinton v. Obama primary results state by state, not using any polling data at all. He was using it just on demographic information. He basically had concluded that there was enough of a pattern which, after a certain number of primaries, to deduce which demographics go which way, and was able to successfully predict how each state was going to go without using any polling data at all. And that caught people's attention. I said it caught the Obama campaign's attention. And he had a very good track record in the general election, too, although you could argue so did a lot of people because that was not a close race. But he got hired by the Times after that. He started on the Daily Kos. He had his own website, 538. 538 migrated to the New York Times. And his premise is that there are all these factors out there that can help you assess the probability of a win. And I think he's always very careful to say that he's not predicting, he's assessing probabilities. And while most people following the news have a kind of pack mentality with every new poll number that comes out, he plops that poll number into his larger model, and it tends to say, look, this one number does not whitewash all these other factors. So let's keep those numbers in perspective, and that's why I have this model. So what has certainly caught people's attention right now is his model has long said that Obama has a high probability of winning, even though it also says that his projected popular vote total is only slightly above 50%. But he is arguing that these leads he has in key states look pretty stable, and therefore it's unlikely that Romney can overcome that. I think that's probably a very crude assessment of his bottom line. But to get back to my own personal criticism, For example, I know he has one of his factors what the in-trade market says, and I find the in-trade market to be completely ridiculous. That's the logic is these people have money on the line, therefore they're going to know more than you, and of course, there are plenty of people who lose money in the stock market. They have money on the line. You can still do dumb decisions. You can still be caught by conventional wisdom, pack mentality, and the like. Now, I don't know all of Nate's model, so I can't tell you how much that really is a factor there. That's sort of it's like a minor red flag for me. Maybe there's a bunch of stuff in this model that I don't agree with or doesn't bear out to be true. But what I don't agree with the criticism that we're getting is, and Joe Scarborough led this on MSNBC the other day. Anyone who thinks this is not a coin flip situation is an ideologue and doesn't know what they're talking about. And he. For all we can tell, he is a professional in this industry, and he's using some, from what I understand, to be tested techniques. That doesn't make him infallible, but to say I have a model that suggests that Obama has a 70% or so probability of winning, is not the same that it's going to be a landslide, or that Romney can't win. And so why the right is making a bit of an obsession about discrediting him before the actual event happens, I find a little strange. When the media narrative already is that it's a close race, Nate Silver's upsetting that narrative.
I think I can explain.
What's the value?
I think I can explain to you because I just wrote a piece about why I think conservatives are hating on Silver, and I think there are several reasons for this. One is. I think that intuitively conservatives, and by the way, I know that this casts me as like the baseball manager for the Oakland A's who...
Your Art Howe?
Yeah, who disagreed with Billy B, in the movie Moneyball. So I know this sort of casts me, or even worse than the manager would be the scouts. Who would go and say, yeah, he looks like a good hitter. He's got a great swing. And did you see his girlfriend? As if that was predictive of his success as a major leaguer. So I realize that. But one of the things, and I have a whole list of things. I thought about doing a listicle, but I just sort of wrote a column instead. But one of the things that I think conservatives don't like is that if you... And conservatives are inherently skeptical of the best and the brightest who come up with these utopian models, sort of McNamara-ish, that can solve all the problems and always get everything right. And conservatives are very skeptical of that notion, that we can sort of master and figure out anything, because the world is so complex and there are so many factors. So this is ideological in a sense, but they want to make it into a war on math. And you have... Ezra Klein and essentially people implying, and including Silver. I mean, Silver tweeted out in all caps the other day, "Can't believe meteorologists use math and science to predict this storm. They must be magic wizards." And the implication is that if you dare to question this model, that you are a rube who is launching a war on math. So I think that's maybe at the top of the list of things that have kind of sparked conservative ire. The other thing worth noting is Nate Silver isn't just some guy in a basement who is putting together numbers for baseball, for baseball games or statistics or even politics. I mean, he is at the New York Times, and he is given an incredible platform. And when he says that it's 70% likely Obama wins. If he says there's 5% chance that the San Francisco Giants will win the World Series again next year, that doesn't have any consequences. The umpires don't make bad calls because of that. Fans don't quit going to see the Giants because of that. But when he puts these numbers out, they actually have consequences. They actually can drive media coverage, drive sort of the momentum is going toward Obama. They can depress turnout numbers, money, all sorts of things.
But I don't see the national media using Nate as the assignment editor for their narrative. The media narrative is that it's a dead heat based on what new national polls have come out. It's ABC, Washington Post, and CBS, New York Times, and NBC, Wall Street Journal. Those polls are setting the narrative.
Well, I think that
the media.
I do think
the media impact that Nate is having. And I think Ben Smith at BuzzFeed tweeted this. I mean, Nate is preventing the quote all-out panic from the left. It's the left that he came up from the liberal bloc.
Okay, but let's agree that could have consequences. I mean, if the left panicked, that could hurt Obama and hurt his. So look, I would say that the media right now wants the race to be close, but for much of the year, I think Silver, especially among opinion elites, the very top, the people on the BuzzFeed, the Politicos, the people on Twitter, that Silver was driving the narrative a little bit more.
I mean, but I mean, when the media coverage was Obama's going to win, it's because every poll said he was going to win. It wasn't Nate.
So
it was the wide range of polling data that was out there.
Well, the other funny thing is, Ezra Klein took to the Washington Post to defend him, Silver, and there were at least two things that I took from Klein's post that interested me. The first, Ezra writes, if Silver's model is hugely wrong, if all the models are hugely wrong, and the betting markets are hugely wrong, it's because the polls are wrong, which is exactly what conservatives have been arguing the whole time. So my point is, I completely agree with that. Nobody, some people have alluded to the fact that because Nate worked for, or Nate blogged at Daily Kos, he may have a vested interest in Obama winning. But I think the vast majority of the criticism has been not that he is intentionally skewing the numbers, but that he is relying on polls, which very well might be oversampling Democrats. And if you look at Gallup yesterday, and this, some people disagree with this, but I think we have to say that Gallup is at least as respected as Nate Silver, although we know he is very highly respected. Gallup says that Romney is winning the early voting. And if that's true, then to me that implies that any polls that are sort of basing their turnout models off of the 2008 turnout are going to be wrong. I mean, clearly, if Romney's winning early voting, then the momentum and energy is on his side. To me, that indicates that some of the polls may be wrong, which might mean that garbage in, garbage out. The last
now is that Gallup poll of early voting nationwide or swing states?
Oh, geez, that's a valid question. I think it's nationwide. If you go to my post,
because I've seen other reporting about the actual party turnout in those states where there is party turnout, and you have some states where the Democratic vote is going very well, like Ohio, and you have other states like Colorado where the Republicans are doing quite well. So I think there's different ways you can slice that data.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. Let me read it to you. What I wrote: Romney currently leads Obama 52 to 46% among voters who say they've already cast their ballots. That's a fairly there is the margin of error, but I guess my point is that I think Democrats have traditionally done very well in early voting, and I think that Obama destroyed McCain in 2008 in early voting. And so if that's not the case, let's just say that they're tied, that Romney's not even winning. If they're tied, I think that bodes fairly well for Romney.
I mean, and there's a difference here between. I mean, I'm looking at the Gallup poll right now. They break it down regionally, but not by swing state. From what I can see here, they ask the Gallup is asking you, have you already voted? Now, I believe there's a difference as far as party turnout goes between early voting. You actually go to the polling place and vote yourself, or absentee voting. I think Republicans have always done well with absentee voters. And Democrats have done well with early voting. So that already voted number from Gallup might be conflating the two, and therefore it might not be easily translated to what professionals call early voting. But yeah, this is all very speculative. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Let me just the last thing I would say, and then I'm done, and I'll shut up a little bit. But just to finish out my take on what's bothering conservatives, Ezra Klein also writes: if Mitt Romney wins on Election Day, it doesn't mean that Silver's model was wrong, which is true. I mean, if he gives Romney, he's giving Romney a 30% chance of winning, and if it's 30% chance of rain and it rains, you wouldn't be completely surprised. So that's technically true, but one gets the sense that the media is laying the groundwork preemptively so that if Nate Silver is correct in the sense that if Obama wins, he will be celebrated and deified, and he will become the Wonder Boy. If Obama, but if Obama loses, if Romney wins, they've already laid the groundwork. So it's funny. Romney has a 70% chance of winning. Nate Silver has a 100% chance of winning. He is in a no-lose scenario.
Well, and I think that speaks to why it doesn't make sense to use what Nate is doing as predictive, and it doesn't make sense to politically use him as a way to make you feel good or bad about where things are going. I mean, that's just I think Nate's probably a little on one hand as a professional saying, look, I'm not trying to be predictive here. I'm giving you probabilities. On the other hand, I'm sure he knows full well that's why people like reading his stuff.
Right. See,
gives you that sense of.
I think you're exactly right, Bill. And I think that it's like Jon Stewart. I think he was just on Jon Stewart the other week. If Jon Stewart could talk politics and make all sorts of political statements, and then the minute you push back, he says, "Oh, I'm just a comedian. I'm just a comedian." And one gets a sense that's the same game that Silver is playing. He is benefiting off of people thinking this is a prediction, that it's a forecast, 70% chance. And then, but the minute that you push back on that, oh, hey man, hey dude, I'm not predicting that. I'm doing analysis. I mean, so I think he is trying to kind of have it both ways a little bit. That's my take, and I think that's what conservatives feel. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of.
I mean, I don't think it's the most unethical thing a person in the media has ever done in their lives. It's just nature of the business. But I mean, a part of me has always looked at what Nate's done as sort of interesting, but without a ton of value. Because I mean, it's treating politics more like a board game to me, and not about ideas and persuasion. But I do think he's had some value in these weeks to say, and maybe it's a two wrongs make a right thing. Let's not have a race dictated in the final 2 weeks by a slicing and dicing of poll data and a horse race game. Why are we having a final 2 weeks about the direction of the country? Isn't that what the whole point's supposed to be? And I do think so. On one hand, I think Nate is part of the media industry that makes solid big game and doesn't make it about election of ideas. On the other hand, I think he's provided some kind of antidote to, at least if it's going to be a game, at least it would be a more complex one that has some richness and some nuance to it, and not just about whatever poll number pops out of the chute that day. Everyone treats this as a tablet from God. So I don't feel like his net impact on the race this year is a net negative. I mean, if Nate Silver wasn't at the Times, we'd still be having a stupid horse race discussion about polls with or without Nate Silver. At least Nate's providing some underlying analysis and context to these numbers that at least might make you stop and think for a second.
I will say there was somebody who wrote, I think it was at the DC Examiner, but maybe not. I don't recall. This person maybe wasn't even, it might have been a freelancer, but in any event, somebody wrote that Nate Silver, and they said something about him looking or being effeminate or something like that, which I thought was over the top. My criticism of him and questioning, and by the way, I think there's at least a 50-50 chance that Obama could win. I mean, I'm not predicting a Romney win. And I think Nate Silver is a smart guy. There's no doubt about that. but I think that it's a little smug, a little condescending, a little bit too sure that they have figured things out. And I'm always skeptical of the guy who has all the answers and who knows everything, especially when it's sort of the best and the brightest. But I don't think that we should be attacking him personally like that. So, for what it's worth.
So the other thing that you mentioned briefly, which is still something that I heard Rush Limbaugh today talking about the partisan sample of these polls, the Quinnipiac polls that they've been doing for the Times and CBS, had Obama with pretty solid lead in Ohio, 5 points, and a smaller lead in Virginia, and was it Florida? I forget the third state. And so Rush was going back to the partisan sampling. He's like, oh my God, the Quinnipiac, they have Democrats at a +7, and Rasmussen, has it at a +2. I forget what it was. So obviously the Quinnipiac turnout model is ridiculous, and this whole unskewed polls trend on the right is hinging on this. Let's take the Rasmussen philosophy. And this is the debate here.
Yeah.
The Nate Silver debate is. Do you just look at polls, or do you look at polls in a broader statistical model that brings in other factors to make your projections? And I think that the specifics of that debate get kind of lost in the who's up and who's down question. This partisan sampling thing is a different thing. Rasmussen's philosophy is you adjust your sample using bipartisan affiliation. If you get too many Democrats in your sample, you readjust it so it becomes where you think the turnout percentage is going to be. Most polls don't do it that way. Most pollsters say don't adjust bipartisan affiliation because that is inherently fluid, and what you're trying to learn is, are there shifts in party affiliation depending on the polls? You weigh based on race or on age or on geography or income level.
Let me just
reflect the demographic pool of the turnout and then see where the partisan shifts fall.
You're right. I think you're right. Let me just say that quick. I think that some people, and I'm not a pollster or poll expert, but I think that some people initially, naively, wrongly thought that you should have an equal number. Right? That Republicans and Democrats should be polled equally, and that's obviously not true. You call a random sample large enough to be statistically, accurate, and you get the likely voters, and it doesn't matter if they say they're Republican or Democrat. Number one, there's not the exact number. There's more Democrats than Republicans in America still, I think. The worst thing you could do would be we're gonna talk to an even number of Republicans and Democrats. I think some people initially thought that made sense. It doesn't. Having said that, I think that one of the things missing from these wonks is a little horse sense, a little political sagacity, right? And again, I know that I'm like playing the scout versus Billy Bean here, but I'm okay with that. The numbers are important, but there's also, history and political savvy and other things that matter. And again, if you believe that the turnout is going to be the way it was in 2008, and you base your polling on that, and from that point on, everything you do is perfect, your methodology is perfect, you're going to have a flawed poll. Because it will not be like 2008. It's just not going to happen. Barack Obama in 2008.
You don't know that. Maybe it is. Who knows?
That I would shave my head for. We saw. Okay, I won't really. I wouldn't really do that. If I had a mustache, I would shave that. Bill, come on. In 2008, Barack Obama was a messiah. Barack Obama was. Now there's no way that's going to happen. It's implausible.
This is the big question.
It's not a question. I don't even. I find it completely implausible that the turnout for Obama in 2012 will be as good as it was in 2008. It seems absurd to me.
I think there are two there are two competing factors here. One is the question of an enthusiasm gap. Is President Obama's base going to be less enthused and therefore turn out in smaller numbers than they did in 2008, particularly amongst young people, African Americans, Latinos, single women, etc.? There is some polling to suggest that. I think there's a competing factor, a much more aggressive early voter push than last time, which is pretty aggressive. But there are projections that the early vote count will be higher than last time.
Well, I can also say,
and there's also more.
I can also say Romney will have a much more money and a dramatically better organized ground game than McCain. There's no doubt about that.
Well, maybe. That's a possibility.
Well, but see, here's where the wonks and their spreadsheets, they can't make this prediction because you can't prove. I mean, look, Romney can say we knocked on 4,572 doors. They can say that, but these are the things that I think where common sense and prognostication can matter. Again, I'm not predicting Romney will win. I'm saying
I agree. I agree up to your last sentence there. I don't think you can apply common sense here. In addition to the early voting, there's also the question of micro-targeting, which is a pretty new phenomenon, and we don't know how well it's going to work for the Obama campaign. But they are making the argument that they have a very sophisticated operation that is uniquely good at getting out unlikely voters. If that is true, it could compensate for the enthusiasm gap. Now, it also could be that the Romney campaign's ground game is markedly better than the McCain ground game. And so even if the Obama ground game is really awesome, that's carried by the Romney thing. These are all speculative. And every pollster out there is making a guess what the turnout's going to be like, weighing these sorts of factors. Historically speaking, there's not a lot of up and down.
They
make up the demographic
They
turnout.
tend to be guessing that things will be like they were in 08. That's sort of the default assumption.
Well, it might be where they're guessing it's going to be like it was in 04. I mean, I think a lot of pollsters, they ask the question, do you plan to vote? Are you following the race closely? Are you excited? There's different ways they try to do the screen. Did you vote last time? Did you vote in the last two elections? Everyone does it a little bit differently. I think a lot of these pollsters are suggesting, what you're saying, weaker enthusiasms. I don't necessarily think that they are presuming a demographic makeup akin to 08. I think they are assuming it's going to be more of a tilt to Republicans relative to 08, but I don't exactly know. But this part of the game is art, not science. It's not math. And this is also where Nate Silver is not math. His construction of his model is subjective, not objective. He's making choices, what he believes are the key factors. And I'm not saying it's totally out of thin air, but there's a degree of subjectivity to all of this.
All right, so let me say, if we were to put our money, I think you're right. If we were to put our money on the line here, would you give me 70 to 30 odds?
I mean, being that I've seen Nate do this, and there's another guy, Simon Jackson, Huffington Post, is also a poli-sci prof. He did something similar. He also came out to around 70%. If I found one more person who did a similar kind of analysis and also got 7%, I'd say, you know what? This seems to be the academic statistician view of the world. Those are as good at setting betting odds as anybody else. Sure, why not?
I would definitely
saying those odds.
I'm not a bettor, but if you give me those odds, I'm a bettor. I would, because I think it's probably 50-50. But if you're saying, so anyway, we can probably talk all day on this. I don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. I think we're.
But the one final point I would make about this, I do think that because of the way the Obama campaign is constructed, I mean, they are the first campaign. Usually any attempt to go after the unlikely vote doesn't work. And that's why pollsters discount it and go by likely voter models for their final polling. This is a somewhat unusual development in the history of presidential politics. And I don't know if it's going to work or not, but it will be interesting to see the demographics of the final turnout based on what the pollsters were presuming and see if it is different. And I just don't think that's a knowable until, you run the final test.
I agree. We don't know. There are all sorts of variables, and it will be, I guess, Bill, this is our last pre-election show.
I know.
So it's
my last chance to be totally wrong.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure on us, Bill. I'm not sure we're up to it. Let's talk about.
Well, the other thing that
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to segue. I was going to segue to the other thing I know that was on your mind today, which is President Obama's storm tour of New Jersey with Governor Chris Christie. We're talking Wednesday afternoon. I'm actually not sure if it's actually happened yet or not. Maybe it has. I haven't seen any video of it yet. I haven't seen if Chris Christie has found a way to talk smack about Obama while I stand next to him, unlike what he said yesterday, which I half expect to happen. But it certainly seems to be a bit of a political chatter. Why is Chris Christie being so effusive? I mean, it's one thing to be the sort of the standard, we're getting everything we asked for the federal government. I have no complaints. We thank the federal government for all the work without putting in such personal terms of Obama, and to be so dismissive to the question whether Romney shows up or not. I don't care. If you think I'm thinking about presidential politics now, you don't know me. And this is, of course, I think in the same breath as he's completely disparaging the mayor of Atlantic City in completely, I think, juvenile terms. When all the guy was doing was creating some shelters so people who couldn't evacuate have a place to go. Which I read that first, I was like, well, that's a really political thing to say in the middle of a storm. And then he comes off with this huge, praise for Obama. It all doesn't compute, which goes back to one of my earlier comments with Chris Christie. I always think the guy is totally mentally balanced. But is there any, inside chatter what Christie could be thinking, why he's doing it this way?
There are a lot of theories, but to me, there are two that ring true to me. That ring plausible. One could be he thinks Romney's going to lose, and he is utterly focused on re-election in New Jersey. He's up, I think, in 2013. New Jersey's obviously a blue state, very tough state. His likely opponent will be Cory Booker, who is known, the mayor of Newark, who is known for being the man on the scene and sort of in emergencies and being hands-on. So, in a sense that Chris Christie blunts that and sort of matches him at his strength. And of course, I had one person, one smart reader emailed me to say that in a way, Obama is sort of hurting Cory Booker here by showing up. I agree, Bill. It's weird.
The way Cory Booker's been in his campaign, I'm not sure that upsets Obama very much.
It's weird. The praise was effusive. I think my gut, and I've no inside information, but based on my being around him a little bit, and based on the fact that this is very out of character, and with just 6 days to go, putting this in context of just 6 days to go before the election, my gut is that there's some sort of a rift between Team Romney and Team Christie. I mean, I can't imagine that if they were still tight, if they were still talking all the time, and Christie was advising the campaign, that with just 6 days to go, no matter how bad this is, that he would be this effusive and really helping Obama look very presidential, which I think could have impact nationally.
Now, to the first theory, that doesn't really add up to me because, I mean, he could do the professional thing, thank the federal government, do the tour with Obama, and not have the praise be so enthusiastic and personal, and still be in fine shape for re-election. I mean, the guy's not losing as it stands in New Jersey. I don't see why he would have to do this to solidify his local standing, and he certainly risks hurting his Republican standing nationally if he's thinking about presidential primary, 2015, 2016.
It seems
the political logic of that
it seems irrational and weird, and we're searching for arguments, whether it's political survival or ambition, whatever. This is odd. This is very odd. This is not normal. And by the way, nobody's saying. I just want to put this out there, not for you, Bill, but for our viewers. Nobody is saying he should have been mean to Barack Obama or rude to him. Everybody acknowledges, I think, that Christie should have been respectful to the president and all that. The question is the extent to which he has essentially kind of thrown Mitt Romney under the bus a little bit. Because what's Romney going to do? He's a challenger. What's he going to do to counter that? He's got nothing. I mean, I will say this, Romney has really probably done about as good as you could expect him to do in this situation by holding those events that, raised money and funds for disaster relief. But it's tough for a challenger to match what a president can do during the national crisis.
Well, let me push back on that a little bit here. There's the simmering issue of Mitt Romney and his stance on FEMA, whether he believes it should be delegated to the states or even privatized, based on his comments in one of the Republican debates. I think the campaign's responses to that have been a little muddled, and Romney is not didn't answer questions point blank about it. There's a bit of an issue with the event he did in Ohio this week, asking for canned goods when the Red Cross doesn't want canned goods. The Red Cross wants money, and the campaign said, well, we know that, but we talked to the Southern New Jersey Red Cross, and they'll take the cans, and it'll be okay. But generally speaking, it's probably not what they really, really want at this moment. So it raises the question: are they doing a photo op, or are they really trying to help? Now maybe neither of these things you think have really broken and blown up big yet. But again, contrasting that to Obama at this point being perceived as taking command of the situation, in part thanks to Chris Christie's validation. Right. Of his actions so far.
And if this race is as close as we think it might be, I mean, if this race comes down to a few hundred votes in Cuyahoga County or something, then any little thing could matter with 6 days left to go.
Well, and this really gets to the heart of what the two campaigns' narratives have been. I said earlier that I did not think the first debate was going to change the fundamental dynamic of the race. Obviously, most people would say that I was wrong at this point.
Yes.
I certainly grant that it's tight in the race a lot more than I expected, but I'm not totally ready to say. I mean, again, Obama could still whether it's actually led to a lead change, I think is still debatable based on the polling model. But it certainly has shown that the lead that Obama had in September was a little soft. He certainly had the lead when the race was framed as, are we better off than we were 4 years ago? Sure, even though it's not great, and the guy who's trying to beat him wants to turn the clock back, and that's no good. I think when Romney's been able to blur the ideological distinctions this month and then make the case that this guy has not been good enough, he doesn't know how to lead. He doesn't know how to get us out of this ditch. I'm not going to take us off an ideological cliff, and I know how to turn things around. Then the race is tightened up more. So part of that Romney narrative now is questioning his leadership, and Christie, as a surrogate, has emphasized that. There's the quote of him saying, Obama's in the White House walking around in the dark, doesn't know where the light switch is. Right. So for Christie to praise his leadership, which is what he is doing.
And the other thing too, is one of Romney's big arguments lately has been that, in fact, if you read David Brooks's column this week, Brooks was arguing that Obama would, if reelected, it would sort of be more stasis, more grinding it out, basically the same as the last 4 years. But Romney would be much more likely to get bipartisan support and bring people with. So, and Romney, if you look at the debates, has been stressing his time of late. He didn't do this earlier in the campaign, but lately he's been talking about the bipartisanship and bringing people together, and I'll work with Democrats. Well, this sort of undermines that because you have Obama working with Chris Christie to get things done in a very serious manner. I tell you what, this boggles the mind that Christie is doing this. And you're right, Bill, when you set this up earlier. If you watch the video where they asked Chris Christie, what about bringing in Mitt Romney too? And he's like, no, he's just so dismissive of it. And I don't care about the election. Let me say this. I understand that Chris Christie cares about his state. But saying that you don't care about the election implies that you don't believe. I mean, if you believe that there are big differences between these two men, and presumably Christie does, then certainly electing the leader of the free world who will be president for 4 years is very important. And for Christie to suddenly, I don't care about it.
Christie's own past comments suggest that.
I couldn't care less.
Christie's one time, this is the most important election, in our lifetimes, and, this is whether or not we become Greece or become a shining city on the hill. He says all that kind of, he talks about it in very, very stark terms. Does all of a sudden that doesn't matter?
Yeah, all of a sudden,
It undercuts his own credibility,
it's
I think.
Bizarre. I think that, I think it helps him in the state. I think it helps him among independents and moderates and liberals. I think you're right. This could hurt him nationally. He's already got some asterisks. People have mostly overlooked them because, again, as I've said a million times, we conflate toughness with ideological purity. And the guy's from a difficult state, so he's cut a little bit of slack. And he's tough, so people think he's conservative. But this is just one more thing from I think it doesn't hurt him in the state that much. But I think nationally, this continues to undermine or erode his good standing with conservatives.
I would think that. And just to circle back what I was trying to say before, in the same way I think that Obama's lead proved to be a little soft, so could Romney's uptick. I mean, this uptick that Romney's had has only been for 2 weeks. It's not like I would not argue that there's some sort of deep, abiding love for Romney in the middle of the electorate right now. This has been a fluid moment in October, which is unusual for October. October is not usually. It's one thing to have a knife's edge race that's been knife's edge all the way through. Usually, it's either knife's edge all the way through or one guy's clearly ahead than the other. If I have to go up and down like this in October is unusual. And now you have a moment here where if the narrative that Romney's been using to tighten the race up is getting blown apart, that race could snap back. Now, I think there's another wild card out here is, look, it's very possible that power is not going to be on in a lot of places come Election Day. And, if you recall what happened in the snowstorm in New England in 2011, people get pretty itchy after 4 or 5 days without power. And it may not be fair to expect power to get on earlier. And maybe because the storm was really preordained as Frankenstorm, people will be more understanding of how long that it's taking. Certainly in Connecticut in 2011, people were not all that understanding, and there was some legitimate reason for that. There was some evidence that they should have had more workers on standby, and they didn't. But I don't know if anyone's going to make those kind of allegations this time or next week. And in many ways, it's actually parallel to the entire economy, to the whole economic situation. Should you be relieved that we've got as far ahead as we have since the 2008 financial crisis, because it was such a dire crisis and so hard to dig out of, or should you be upset that it's taking this long to fully get out of it? And Sandy is a similar kind of situation, or could be if people start getting itchy after several days without power. Does it make people feel next week that Obama he really can't turn around? He gives a nice speech at the front end, but at the end of the day, he can't follow through. Or does it make people feel like, this guy's been through so much. This guy's been plugging away so hard. He's got so many things that get thrown at him, and he just keeps going at it. I get where he's taking us now. It makes me a little bit more reassured. That is so unclear to me how people might react to that. It is so unusual for an event like this to have that kind of meaning late in the race. There's just not a lot of historical data for it, and that's why it's hard to say for sure which way it's going to go.
Well, anecdotally speaking, there's certainly been occasions where politicians have lost because they didn't rise to the occasion. Mayor LaGuardia, I think, lost, although I think he later won as an independent or something, but lost an election because it didn't get the snow shoveled after a big storm. I think there was a mayor of Chicago who lost because of a similar situation. But more often than not, I think
Marion Barry got kind of run out of the mayor's seat, because of his poor response to the blizzard in the late 90s.
I think George W. Bush suffered greatly because of Katrina. I think that really did end. That was the beginning of the end for him. But having said that, I think by and large these circumstances are more an opportunity for politicians. I think more often, I think it's anecdotal, but my gut is that more often than not, this helps them. They appear presidential. So my guess is this probably is, if anything, if it moves the needle at all, it's a net positive for Obama.
Okay, before we go, can I ask you a final ideological question about this subject?
You may.
I'm truly, truly befuddled at the conservative ire towards FEMA. I mean, I get in the abstract that there's a general dislike of federal government bureaucracy. Maybe there's a very sincere feeling that states can do this sort of thing better, or the private sector could do it better, and all that. But we've had, 35 years of experience with FEMA. It started with Jimmy Carter. He was the first person to centralize the operations. But Republicans generally have not taken it seriously. They didn't hire disaster management professionals for the job. George Bush Sr. got burned with it with Hurricane Andrew in '92. Clinton, in his autobiography, said he made a mental note at the time that, no one's going to elect me because of my disaster management record, but I sure might lose an election if I don't do this well when the time comes. So I'm going to make damn sure to bring someone who knows what he's doing if I do get elected. And he brought in a pro, and FEMA was considered very well respected in the 90s. And then Bush comes in and then he throws the model out, and he goes back to the old way of doing things, and it gets burned in Katrina. Obama goes back to the professional model. FEMA is well respected right now. I mean, if you're for limited government as opposed to no government, why can't a limited government conservative say, yes, you need a FEMA, and you need a pro doing it, and that's not a bastardization of basic conservatism to acknowledge that. Just out of crass politics, I don't get it.
Well, I think you're mostly right, Bill. A few things. One, I mean, I've always been the kind of guy, I like if I were a politician, and there's a good reason I'm not, but I believe that if there's a fire somewhere in your town, people like to see the mayor on the sidewalk with the firefighters. Like, maybe there's nothing you can do, but they like to see you there. I believe in constituent service. I believe that there's something good about, we deride machine politics and bosses and all. There's a lot of bad corruption and bad stuff there. But I do believe that public servants, mayors especially, the executives, need to sort of be on the ground. I think some conservatives don't. They don't like that. I remember when Mark Sanford was, quote unquote, walking the Appalachian Trail, somebody, it might have been Red State, somebody was saying how refreshing it was that a governor can just leave his state without telling anybody, and that was obviously pure spin. I mean, now, to FEMA specifically, I need to research this. I don't know. I do know that there are a lot of conspiracy theories about FEMA being, part of like a new world order and sort of not having, being able to exercise great control and authority without supervision. I'm not sure where it's sort of the black helicopter thing. I'm not sure where that came from or to what degree.
Alex Jones at InfoWars is a big proponent of those sorts of theories. I think Glenn Beck has picked up that.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe there's some legitimacy to it. Maybe they don't have or didn't have the right oversight. Maybe they did have like incredible authority to do things, but I'm not sure why. Look, I think it does make sense to me that you should have some sort of a national effort. Clearly, these storms that happen hit regions that, you wouldn't want to have a thing where, like, Maryland and Virginia aren't working together because Maryland has a Republican governor, Virginia has a Democrat. I mean, it does make sense to have some coordination. I mean, I don't necessarily think it has to be FEMA or that it has to be set up the way that it is. But by the same token, I don't have, I'm not out to get them or think that they're specifically evil or bad or a bad idea. But you're right. I mean, there are some who kind of make them into a boogeyman.
It just seems like you have let's say Romney does win. Romney has a chance to make a break and say, yes, this is a working part of government. I don't need to cut this part of it.
Right. Well,
I may need to cut a bunch of other things that don't work, but this works. So let's leave it alone.
I should have, I started writing, Bill, a couple weeks ago, a column for The Week magazine. I don't think that I announced that here. And my latest column is on Mitt the moderate. And I don't think Romney gets rid of FEMA. I think Romney's a moderate. I think that's why he's part of the reason he's been doing so well lately. He's being himself. He wasn't, when he ran in the primary, he seemed weird and awkward and inauthentic, and it's because he is not a severely conservative person. He's more of a moderate, and I don't think he's going to get rid of FEMA. Conservatives may not be happy with that, but my gut is that Romney's going to kind of be if he's elected, which I suppose he has a 30% chance. He's going to be sort of a moderate guy who's not going to. I hope he tackles entitlement reform and stuff like that pretty aggressively, but I don't see him scaling down things like FEMA.
This is the David Brooks argument that a flexible flip flopper is just what we need, and he's going to, and his real inner moderate's going to come through. And look, that may be true as far as what Romney would like to do. But Brooks sort of really glosses past the Republican Congress in his analysis and suggests that Romney would be very happy to cut a deal with Senate Democrats for a deficit reduction deal that raises taxes on the wealthy, and conservatives on Tucker will be outraged, but Republicans in Congress will go along because they don't want to sabotage the Republican president. That part of the analysis strikes me as absolutely ludicrous.
Well, it kind of happened during the
minimum
Bush
baseless.
years. Bush didn't veto.
Well, I mean, Harriet Miers, for Pete's sake, they went to town on Harriet Miers, which was pretty embarrassing for the president.
Well, that was 6 years into his administration or something. That was the first time they stood up to him.
Well, and the whole Tea Party 2 years was to flagellate themselves that they went along with Medicare Part D and they went along with No Child Left Behind. We're never going to do that again.
Right.
We're never going to betray our principles again.
But they will, Bill. They will. It's going to be. Again, as David Brooks says, it's going to be
George Bush Sr.
The president's going to,
after George Bush Sr. violated his tax pledge, that Romney's going to violate a tax pledge of all things.
Here's what happens, though: you get
taxes.
Romney says, if he's elected, Romney says, "Are you going to?" He calls in a congressman and says, "Are you going to be the one who ruins my presidency a month into it? We're going to go along with this. We're going to get bipartisan agreement." That's how it works. Philip Klein wrote a great book, an ebook about this, A Conservative Guide to Surviving the Romney. We're going to be in the veal pen, Bill.
You really think?
No, I'm not. I won't be in the veal pen, but a lot of my colleagues probably will be.
I have to say, at minimum, at absolute minimum, for Brooks to say that it's a near certainty that Romney's going to pull that off. And Obama, who, if I may say, every bill that he's passed has had Republican support on it, except for Obamacare, and that was at least a Republican idea that he took. The whole Budget Control Act was a huge bipartisan success that Obama did, among many other things.
I don't know if Romney. I don't know if Romney can have any, bipartisan support and change things. I know Obama can. That the well is poisoned. The die is cast. It's not going to happen.
Everyone says that, but look, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, START Treaty, Wall Street Reform, Recovery Act, Fair Sentencing Act, Food Safety, GI Bill, and Budget Control Act. These all had Republican votes, every single one of them. I don't understand the argument that he doesn't know how to do this or has no interest in doing it. I mean, he was up against a pretty fierce wall of Republican obstruction and still find a way to get a bunch of those things done. And what Romney brings to the table that's somehow new and unique, I'm befuddled with what that is.
I mean, I think that, people's gut instinct is that Romney looks and feels like a moderate and that he is a moderate and that he's not going to, maybe he'll pick a legacy, something like entitlement reform that could be very controversial, and he'll fight hard for that. But by and large, I think and I think that's part of the reason he's been doing much better, is that people just get the sense that he's not a radical, that he's not an extremist, he's just kind of a moderate Republican.
Oh, I agree. That's why he's doing better. But what I find strange with that is he literally has not proposed one idea that remotely threatens his base. I mean, Obama has gone on record a couple of times as saying he wants to do a deal that is $2.50 of spending cuts for every $1 in tax increases. A lot of folks in his base do not like that deal, but he's on record supporting it. There's nothing that Romney has supported in this campaign that is remotely parallel to that.
If you give me a couple weeks, I might think of something, Bill. But we don't have a couple. Okay, we don't have a couple weeks. Election day is on Tuesday. This thing is coming down to the wire. This is going to be fun, and I know they're huge.
I thought this was the worst, soulless, most dreary campaign ever.
Well, there's huge consequences. And by the way, I don't know if you saw. There's a great video of this. Did you see this video of this little girl who's crying about Obama and Romney that just wants the campaign to end? It's great if you haven't seen it. It's hilarious. This is when it gets fun. I mean, it's been a long, tough slog, and I'm glad it's ending. But and the consequences are huge. But if you are a political junkie, this is the World Series. This is a Super Bowl for you. So buckle your seatbelts. Get the beer ready. Don't uncork the champagne just yet if you're a Republican. But it's gonna be
quick plug before we go, Matt.
Yes, sir.
So we're taping on Wednesday the 31st. Thursday, November 1st, I will be debating at American University. One of your colleagues, Jim Ansel from the Daily Caller.
At the American University.
Magazines. Oh, is that what
it's called? I just feel like, football, it's like the Ohio State. I feel like we should say it, the American University. I like it.
Okay. Also, Reason Magazine's Tim Kavanaugh. This is sponsored by the Young Americans for Liberty, which is, I think, formerly Students for Ron Paul. They're doing campus debates all over the country, which is liberal versus conservative versus libertarian. And I assume the question will have a libertarian flavor to it. But I'm the chum for this round. 7 o'clock, American University. If you go to, I think it's yaliberty.org, they have more details there. So hopefully, if you're in the D.C. area, I'll see you.
So Bill Scher, November 1st, right?
Yeah, Thursday, November 1st, 7 p.m., American University. And I guess until next week, Matt, although if your second child is born, I may not talk to you next week.
That's right. We don't know when he's coming. No man knows the day or hour. We have a date of November 16th, but we don't think it's going to go that long. I'm hoping that he holds out until after Election Day for business reasons. And then, plus, if it's Election Day, I'm going to have to call him Mitt Lewis, which would be weird. Matt Lewis?
Not Willard?
Matt Lewis and Mitt Lewis. So, it could happen It could happen any day. It could happen any day. Hopefully, you and I, Bill, will get together in D.C. For coffee sometime while you're in town.
I hope to.
And assuming the baby doesn't come, we'll have some caffeine.
Till then,
all right. Good show.
Take care.